You are on HOA Karen patrol. The tow hook was inches away. I am standing in the parking lot of Frostwood Estates at 7 in the morning, snow falling in fat flakes, and Michelle Reed is screaming at me about a handrail. She is holding a clipboard with a violation notice clipped to it, waving it in my face, and behind her, a tow truck is idling with its amber lights flashing. She just told me my work truck is getting towed right now unless I pay a $400 fine for leaving frost on the metal handrail outside my unit. I have a delivery of critical heating supplies arriving in 20 minutes, and if my truck gets towed, I cannot move the shipment into the building before the vendor leaves. Michelle does not care. She says the frost is a slip hazard and I should have wiped it down yesterday. I check my watch again. I have a disabled sibling who depends on me, and if the HOA starts towing my truck or locking me out of the complex, it turns into a crisis fast. Michelle leans closer and says, "Smile." I am documenting this for the file. The tiny body camera clipped to her parka is pointing right at my face. I moved to Burlington, Vermont 6 months ago because the rent was affordable, and I got a maintenance technician job at a commercial property downtown. I take care of every system in that building, and I know every rule and every loophole in the code. Frostwood Estates is a master-planned community where the board runs snow patrol after every storm. They have someone walk the property with a clipboard, checking for violations before most people are awake. I thought the rules would be straightforward, but the Frostwood Estates Homeowners Association has a winter policy that nobody will give me a copy of. Michelle Reed is the records custodian, and every time I ask for the policy, she says it costs $50 per page to produce documents, and I need to submit a written request with a check. I submitted 3 requests. She cashed the checks and never sent anything. Now she is telling me the frost violation is in the secret winter policy, and I should have known better. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks ago. I woke up to find a complaint log entry taped to my door. It said I left a snow shovel leaning against the building, and it was a common property violation. The note was obviously written in Michelle's voice, full of phrases like failure to comply and immediate corrective action required. I moved the shovel, but the next day there was another notice claiming I damaged the siding when I leaned the shovel there, and I had to pay $200 immediately, or be charged $20 per day. I went to the management company office to dispute it. The property manager listened, took notes, and said she would look into it. That same afternoon, Michelle called me and said if I kept complaining, she would make my life very difficult. I asked what that meant. She said, "Keep arguing. You are making my case for me." Then she hung up. Now Michelle is telling me the handrail frost is a violation because someone could slip if they grab it. I ask her how frost on a handrail causes a slip. She ignores the question and taps the clipboard. She says the fine is $400, and if I do not pay right now, she is authorizing the tow. I look at the tow truck driver. He is leaning against his cab with his arms crossed, looking bored. I ask Michelle if she has authorization paperwork. She holds up a single sheet and says it is all here. I ask to see it. She pulls it back and says I do not get to review HOA enforcement documents. I check my watch. 18 minutes until the delivery truck arrives. I tell Michelle I need my truck to move supplies. She says that is not her problem, and I should have thought about that before I violated the winter policy. I ask again for a copy of the policy. She says I already know the answer. I kept my voice low because my trump card needed perfect timing. I have been gathering proof for 2 weeks. Every time Michelle sent me a notice, Every time she called with a new threat, every time she showed up at my door with her little camera filming me, I documented it. I took screenshots of the HOA group chat where Michelle and 2 board members were coordinating a targeted winter enforcement wave. They were using the chat to decide who to fine and when, and they were laughing about how nobody would fight back because the policy was secret. One message from Michelle said, "If anyone asks for the policy, just tell them it costs money and stall until they give up." Another board member replied with a laughing emoji and said, "Perfect. Nobody ever pays for records anyway." I saved every message. I also went to the county clerk and pulled the HOA corporate filings. That is when I found the certified copy of the HOA records showing Michelle Reed is not in good standing with her own dues. She owes 6 months of back dues and late fees, which means under the association bylaws, she cannot hold a board position or enforce rules. I have the paperwork in my truck right now, and I am waiting for the right moment to use it. Michelle taps the clipboard again and says, "Last chance. Pay or the truck goes." I tell her I am not paying a fine based on a policy I have never seen. She smiles and says that is my choice. She turns to the tow truck driver and waves him forward. He starts walking toward my truck. I check my watch. 16 minutes. I pull out my phone and call my ally, a local attorney I know through family. His name is David, and he gave me a realistic plan 2 days ago when I showed him the screenshots and the dues paperwork. He told me the HOA is violating open meeting rules by using a private group chat to make enforcement decisions, and the moment I cite the statute, the whole thing will backfire. He also told me to hold the trump card until Michelle tries to escalate in public, because that is when it will have the most impact. He answers on the second ring. I tell him what is happening. He says, "Do not let them tow the truck. Tell Michelle you are filing a formal objection and you have evidence the enforcement is invalid. If she keeps pushing, tell her you will show the evidence to the tow company and the management company right now." I hang up and walk over to Michelle. I tell her I am filing a formal objection and I have evidence the enforcement is invalid. She laughs and says, "Good luck with that." I say I am serious. She says she does not care. I tell her if the tow truck hooks up my vehicle, I will show the tow company the paperwork proving she does not have authority to authorize a tow. She stops smiling. She asks what paperwork. I do not answer. The tow truck driver is standing next to my truck now, looking at Michelle. She waves him forward again. He hooks the chain to the front axle. I walk over to him and say, "Before you tow this truck, you should know the person who authorized this does not have legal standing with the HOA." He stops and looks at me. He asks what I mean. I pull out my phone and show him a photo of the certified dues record. I explain that Michelle owes 6 months of back dues, and under the association bylaws, she cannot enforce rules or authorize actions. He looks at the photo, then looks at Michelle. He asks her if it is true. She yells at him to do his job. He unhooks the chain and says, "I am not towing a vehicle based on invalid authorization. If this blows back on me, I lose my contract." He gets in his truck and drives away. Michelle is furious. She starts yelling that I just cost her money and I am going to pay for it. I check my watch. 14 minutes. I tell her I am done with the games. I have proof she is abusing her position. I have proof the board is violating open meeting laws. And if she does not leave me alone, I am going to the management company and the city with everything I have. She steps closer and says, "Smile. I am documenting this for the file." She taps the body camera. I do not move. I say the camera does not scare me because everything she is filming is going to support my case, not hers. She says I have no case. I tell her to check her own dues account and see if she still feels that way. Her face goes pale. She turns and walks toward the management office without another word. I get in my truck and move it to the loading zone. The delivery truck shows up 12 minutes later. I unload the heating supplies and get them into the building before the vendor leaves. My sibling calls to check in, and I tell them everything is fine. I do not mention the tow truck or the confrontation. They have enough to worry about. I finish the unloading and head to the management office to file a formal complaint. The property manager is the same woman who took notes 2 weeks ago. Her name is Jessica. I show her the screenshots of the group chat, the certified dues record, and the stack of bogus violation notices Michelle has been sending me. Jessica goes quiet. She asks if I have copies. I hand her a folder with everything printed and organized. She says she needs to escalate this to the executive board and the association attorney. She also says she is putting Michelle on a no-contact directive effective immediately, which means Michelle cannot approach me, call me, or send me any notices without going through the management company first. Jessica says the board meeting is in 2 days and I should plan to attend. She also says the association attorney will review the open meeting statute issue and determine if the group chat decisions are enforceable. I thank her and leave. On my way out, I see Michelle standing near the mailbox cluster, talking to another board member. She glares at me, but does not say anything. I check my watch and head to work. My shift at the commercial property starts in an hour, and I need to clear my head before I deal with boilers and HVAC systems. The next day, I get a call from David, my attorney friend. He says Jessica reached out to him to confirm the open meeting statute details. He told her the board cannot make enforcement decisions in a private group chat without posting an agenda and allowing homeowner access. If they did, those decisions are void, and any fines or actions based on them are unenforceable. He also told her the dues issue with Michelle is a separate problem, and if the association does not address it, they are opening themselves up to liability. David says Jessica sounded rattled and asked if I was planning to sue. He told her I just want the harassment to stop and the secret winter policy to be published so everyone knows the rules. She said she would make sure that happens. That night, I get another notice taped to my door. It is not from Michelle. It is from a different board member, someone named Greg. The notice says I am being charged with violating the common property care policy because I allowed snowmelt to pool near the building foundation, and it is causing structural risk. The fine is $600, and I have 48 hours to pay. I take a photo of the notice and text it to David. He calls me back 5 minutes later and says, "They are panicking. This is retaliation, and it is obvious. Do not pay anything. Bring the notice to the board meeting tomorrow and read it out loud. Make them explain the charge in front of everyone." I ask if that is safe. He says it is the safest thing I can do, because the more they escalate in public, the worse they look. The board meeting is held in the community clubhouse. It is a small room with folding chairs and a long table at the front where the board members sit. About 20 homeowners show up, which is more than usual. Everyone has heard about the tow truck incident and the group chat screenshots. Michelle is sitting at the board table, staring straight ahead. Greg is next to her, shuffling papers. The board president, a man named Ron, opens the meeting and starts reading through the agenda. He skips over the open comment period. I stand up and say, "Excuse me, I have a formal complaint to present." Ron looks annoyed, but says I can speak for 3 minutes. I walk to the front and lay out everything. I explain the secret winter policy, the stalling on records requests, the bogus violation notices, the tow truck threat, and the group chat screenshots showing the board coordinating targeted enforcement. I read one of Michelle's messages out loud. If anyone asks for the policy, just tell them it costs money and stall until they give up. The room goes completely silent. Then I pull out the new notice from Greg and read it out loud. I ask him to explain how snow melt pooling near a foundation is a structural risk, especially when the ground is frozen solid and drainage is impossible. Greg does not answer. Ron cuts me off and says my time is up. I sit down. Another homeowner stands up, a woman named Lisa, who lives 2 buildings over. She says she got 3 bogus notices last month and paid $200 in fines because she thought the rules were real. She asks if she can get a refund. Ron says the board will review all enforcement actions and respond in writing. Another homeowner, a man named Carlos, stands up and says he was told his snow shoveling was not fast enough and he got fined $100. He asks where the written standard is. Ron says the standards are in the winter policy. Carlos asks for a copy. Ron says the policy is under review. Carlos asks why it is under review if it is being enforced. Ron does not answer. If you are enjoying this story, please hit like and subscribe for more HOA drama. Michelle stands up and tries to interrupt. She says the complaints are based on misunderstandings and the board has full authority to enforce the rules as needed. Lisa yells, "What rules? Nobody has seen the winter policy." Michelle says homeowners are responsible for knowing the rules. Another homeowner, an older man named Frank, stands up and says, "Then publish the damn rules so we can follow them." The room erupts in applause. Ron bangs his hand on the table and says the meeting will continue in order. He announces a vote to suspend the winter enforcement policy until new standards are published. Michelle tries to interrupt again. Ron ignores her and calls for a vote. 4 board members vote yes. Michelle votes no. The motion passes. Ron announces that the HOA must publish standards and timelines to all homeowners within 30 days. He also announces that Michelle Reed is being placed on a no-contact directive by management and will not be involved in enforcement actions going forward. Michelle stands up and starts yelling that the board has no authority to remove her from her duties. Ron says the directive came from the management company and the association attorney, not the board. Michelle storms out of the room. The meeting ends 10 minutes later. I walk out into the parking lot and find David waiting by his car. He says that went better than I expected. I tell him I cannot believe they folded that fast. He says they had no choice. The open meeting violation was a liability, and the dues issue with Michelle made everything worse. He also says the city is involved now because someone filed a complaint about the HOA interfering with snow routes. Apparently, Michelle was sending notices to homeowners for parking too close to the plow line, and the Public Works Department got tired of fielding calls. The city warned the HOA to stop interfering, or they would start issuing municipal fines. David says the board is terrified of a public fight with the city, so they are backing down on everything. 2 days later, I get a written reversal from management with a real citation. It is a letter signed by Jessica stating that all enforcement actions taken by Michelle Reed between November and January are void, and any fines paid during that period will be refunded. The letter also includes a copy of the new winter policy draft, which is 2 pages long and lists clear standards for snow removal, ice treatment, and common area maintenance. The draft includes timelines for homeowner compliance and a formal appeals process. Jessica says the draft will be posted in the clubhouse and online, and homeowners have 2 weeks to submit comments before it is finalized. I take a photo of the letter and send it to Lisa, Carlos, and Frank. They all reply with messages saying they are getting refund checks this week. Carlos says he is running for the board in the next election because he is tired of the chaos. Frank says he is going to file a complaint with the state attorney general about the secret policy and the group chat. I tell him David already filed that complaint and the state is reviewing the case. The following week, I am at the shared mailbox cluster shoveling snow when Michelle walks by. She does not say anything, but she is carrying a snow-covered camera on a selfie stick and filming the ground. I ignore her. A rideshare driver is waiting in the parking lot with his window down, rolling his eyes as Michelle walks past filming. I finish shoveling and go inside. My sibling calls and asks how things are going. I tell them the HOA situation is resolved, and we do not have to worry about towing or harassment anymore. They sound relieved. I do not mention the board meeting or the group chat screenshots. It is over, and I want to move on. A few days later, I am at the tow yard picking up a receipt for my records. The clerk at the counter recognizes me and says, "You are the guy from Frostwood, right?" I say yes. He says the tow company dropped the HOA contract because they do not want to deal with invalid authorization paperwork anymore. He says Michelle called 3 times trying to get them to reverse the decision, but the owner told her they are done. The clerk laughs and says, "She kept saying you cost her money, and we should bill you for the canceled tow." The owner told her to stop calling, or he would file a harassment complaint. I thank the clerk and leave. That same afternoon, I get a call from Jessica. She says the board voted to hire a new management company because the current contract is not working. She also says Michelle resigned from the board after the association attorney told her the dues issue and the no-contact directive were going to be public record. Jessica says Michelle tried to negotiate a quiet exit, but the board refused and voted to make the resignation effective immediately. Jessica sounds tired. She says, "I have never seen a board implode this fast." I tell her I appreciate everything she did to resolve the situation. She says, "You did the hard part. You documented everything, and you did not back down. Most people just pay the fines and move on." The next board meeting is held 3 weeks later. The new winter policy is finalized and posted online. It includes clear standards, timelines, and an appeals process. Ron, the board president, announces that the city has agreed to drop the interference complaint as long as the HOA stops issuing notices related to public snow routes. He also announces that the association attorney reviewed all enforcement actions from the past 6 months and found multiple violations of the open meeting statute. The attorney recommended the board undergo governance training and implement new procedures for decision-making. Ron says the training will start next month and all current board members are required to attend. Carlos announces he is running for the board in the spring election. Lisa says she is running too. Frank says he is not running, but he will volunteer to serve on the compliance committee to make sure the new policies are followed. The room is packed with homeowners, and for the first time since I moved here, it feels like people are paying attention. After the meeting, I walk back to my unit and see the handrail outside my door. There is no frost on it tonight, but even if there was, I would not care. The policy is clear now, and if the HOA wants to enforce something, they have to follow the rules like everyone else. I check my watch and realize I have been carrying it with me constantly for the past month, always worried about deadlines and deliveries, and the next notice taped to my door. I take the watch off and set it on the counter. I do not need it tonight. A few days later, I run into Frank at the coffee shop downtown. He says the state attorney general opened an investigation into the Frostwood board after reviewing his complaint. The AG is looking at the group chat, the secret winter policy, and the dues issue with Michelle. Frank says the investigation could take months, but the association attorney already told the board to cooperate fully and turn over all records. Frank laughs and says, Michelle tried to delete the group chat, but 3 people already sent screenshots to the AG. I tell Frank I am glad he filed the complaint. He says, someone had to. You did your part, and now the state is doing theirs. That weekend, I get a message from Carlos. He says he talked to the new management company, and they are implementing a formal records request process that includes free access to all governing documents. He says the winter policy, the bylaws, and the meeting minutes will be posted online and updated monthly. Carlos also says the new management company is hiring an independent compliance officer to review all enforcement actions before they are issued. The officer will make sure every notice is based on a real rule and includes an appeals process. Carlos says, no more secret policies and no more bogus fines. I reply and tell him that sounds like a real improvement. He says, we will see. I am going to hold them to it. The spring election happens in April. Carlos and Lisa both win seats on the board. Michelle does not run. Frank volunteers for the compliance committee and gets appointed. Ron stays on as board president, but he announces at the first meeting that he is stepping down in 6 months. He says the past few months were exhausting, and he wants to focus on his family. The new board votes to adopt the formal records, request process, and the independent compliance officer. They also vote to publish a quarterly newsletter with updates on enforcement actions, policy changes, and meeting schedules. Lisa says the newsletter will include a section where homeowners can submit questions and complaints anonymously. The board will respond in writing in the next issue. I do not attend every meeting anymore, but I check the online minutes and I read the newsletter. The HOA feels different now. There are still complaints and disagreements, but the process is transparent and people know the rules. A few homeowners still grumble about the new policies, but most are relieved that the chaos is over. One neighbor tells me, I used to wake up every morning wondering what bogus notice I would find on my door. Now I just shovel my walk and move on. That is all I wanted. In May, I run into Michelle at the grocery store. She is pushing a cart and does not make eye contact. I do not say anything. I do not need to. She knows what happened, and she knows why it happened. A few weeks later, I hear from Carlos that Michelle moved out of Frostwood. He says she sold her unit and left without telling anyone. Carlos says, good riddance. Frank says, I hope the next place she moves to has an HOA that is just as strict with her. I do not reply. I am done thinking about Michelle. The city follows through on its warning and sends an inspector to review the HOA's snow route policies. The inspector meets with the board and confirms that the new winter policy is compliant with municipal regulations. He also says the city appreciates the board's cooperation and will continue to monitor the situation. Ron tells the board the city inspector said Frostwood is one of the better managed HOAs in the area now, which is a huge change from 6 months ago. Lisa says, we still have work to do, but at least we are moving in the right direction. By June, the investigation by the state attorney general is still ongoing, but the association attorney tells the board there will likely be no penalties as long as the HOA continues to follow the new policies and cooperates with the state. The attorney says the AG is more interested in systemic fixes than individual punishment, and Frostwood has already implemented most of the recommended changes. Frank says, "That is fine with me. I do not care about punishing anyone. I just want the rules to be fair." Carlos agrees. The summer is quiet. The board holds regular meetings. The compliance officer reviews enforcement actions, and the newsletter keeps everyone informed. There are no secret policies and no bogus fines. A few homeowners complain about the new appeals process taking too long, but most agree it is better than the old system. I focus on my job and my sibling, and I stop checking my watch every 10 minutes. The HOA is no longer a source of stress. It is just a part of living here, like mowing the lawn or shoveling the walk. In the fall, Carlos runs for board president and wins. He announces at his first meeting that the board will continue to prioritize transparency and fairness. He also announces that the HOA is switching to a new management company that specializes in community governance and compliance. The new company has a reputation for holding boards accountable and following the law. Carlos says, "We are not going back to the way things were. If anyone on this board tries to abuse their position or hide information, I will call them out in front of everyone." The room applauds. I do not attend the meeting, but I read the minutes online. I see that the board voted to publish the compliance officer's quarterly report, which includes statistics on enforcement actions, appeals, and resolutions. The report shows that enforcement actions are down by 60% compared to last year, and appeals are resolved within 2 weeks on average. Carlos says, "This is what good governance looks like. We enforce the rules when necessary, but we do not harass people, and we do not make up rules as we go." The outcome is exactly what I hoped for. The city warned the HOA to stop interfering with snow routes, and the board publicly reversed Michelle's policy to avoid municipal fines. The HOA now publishes standards and timelines to all homeowners, and there is a formal process for records requests and appeals. Michelle is gone, and the board is following the law. I do not have to worry about bogus notices or tow trucks or secret policies. I can focus on my job and my family, and I can live here without constantly looking over my shoulder. I still check my watch sometimes, out of habit, but I do not feel the same pressure I used to. The deadlines are still real, and my sibling still depends on me, but the HOA is no longer a threat. It is just a part of the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is finally functioning the way it should. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next HOA story.